Okay, I see it's nearly 12:05, so I think we can slowly kick off today's session. For those of you who I haven't said hello to yet, good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here today. My name is Stephanie, one of the anatomists from the Learning Curve team, and today I'm hoping that this is going to be an engaging and exciting training session for you on how to use Primal Pictures in your education. And today we're focusing on the functional anatomy and the musculoskeletal systems. I did notice looking at the registrations that a majority of those who registered to attend today are actually from medicine or nursing and not from sports sciences and biokinetics. And that's great because the muscular and skeletal systems need to be known by all healthcare practitioners. And I want you to bear in mind that what we do with the musculoskeletal system today, there's a lot of that same power for all of the other systems. So what you learned today regarding the musculoskeletal system and how to learn it on Primal Pictures, you will be able to apply most of that to all of the other systems that you need to learn about. So I hope you're ready for today. And if you have any questions that come up while we go throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat box because I will address any questions or any comments at the end of the session. Okay, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, just a bit of an agenda of what we'll go through today. I will take you through what Primal Pictures is, if you haven't heard of it before or haven't used it before. And on a similar note, I will recap how to access Primal Pictures, whether you're on campus or off campus. And I'll chat to you about how to download some of the mobile applications which allow you to use Primal Pictures fully offline, which is a really great capability. And then, if you did read the webinar description, you might notice that the titles that we're looking at today have changed very slightly. And I hope you will forgive me for this when I explain why. But the titles that we're going to look at today while we focus on the musculoskeletal system include anatomy and physiology. That was already planned and in your agenda that you received. We're going to take a look at 3D real time instead of real-time functional anatomy because we realize most of the users here today don't have access to that functional anatomy title. So instead of that, we're going to jump into 3D real time, and there I'm going to teach you how to use some really exciting augmented reality and how to use the content fully offline on your phone, which are two huge benefits. And then lastly, we are going to go into functional anatomy. So not real-time functional anatomy, forgive me for what it says there. We're going to go into functional anatomy, which most of you should have access to. And that's where we're really going to focus on biomechanics. But we're going to first touch on the normal anatomy and physiology in A&P. Then we'll jump into the anatomy in more detail in 3D real time. And then we'll finish off with really taking a look at the body in motion when we look at functional anatomy. Okay, so just a recap for those of you who haven't used Primal Pictures before and don't really know what it is. It's a digital learning platform that has been created specifically with health science students in mind. So it's here to help you along your learning process in many different ways. But one of the most important things when it comes to learning any science discipline is accuracy. Accuracy will always be incredibly important in the sciences. And the 3D models that we're going to take a look at today, and all of Primal's 3D models, have been built from real scan data. So that means we are looking at a real body donor and we're looking at real anatomy while we do our learning. And it's really important to learn from an accurate resource so that you have a medically accurate visualization of the anatomy and you're not shocked when you then go and practice in the clinical setting. Okay, Primal caters to a range of different learning styles, and there's lots of different ways you can use the power of this platform. And I'm going to take you through some of those tips and tricks today. So when it comes to Primal, it allows accessible learning on any device, anywhere, anytime, which means you can access Primal on your mobile phone, on a tablet, on a computer, any device. And it has been specifically designed to cater to a range of different needs throughout the health science learning process, like gross anatomy or the anatomy that's visible to the human eye, which I'll take you through today. Dissection is also very important, and we will look at some dissection content today. function and the physiology or the microanatomy is also very important. We will jump into that. Imaging, we are not going to touch on today. Clinical, we will look at a little bit of clinical application, yes. And assessment, we're not going to dive in today. But I just want you to be aware that Primal has very comprehensive capabilities and how it can help you. And today we're going to focus on gross anatomy, dissection, and the functional anatomy and the clinical anatomy of the musculoskeletal systems. Okay. So how do you access this platform? When in doubt, if you are confused, please chat to one of your lecturers or your librarians. But for most of our clients, if you are on campus and connected to the university Wi-Fi, you can access this resource on any device by going directly to the website, which is anatomy.tv. It should log you straight in when you are on campus and connected to the university Wi-Fi. Okay, when you are off campus, you need to go through your library database. So if I'm from SMU, for example, I will Google Sabaka Makatu library website. On their library website, I will then find their e-resources or e-databases. And there will be an alphabetical list. And Primal will either be listed as Primal Pictures or Anatomy TV. These are the same thing. Okay, so you'll use that link when you are off campus. Now, some of our clients aren't set up this way, so I don't want to confuse you. But if you are a student from Netcare or Life Healthcare, then you should know that your access to Primal Pictures is through username and password, and you should have this username and password. All of my other institutions, anyone from not Life Healthcare and not Netcare, please don't worry about that. But if you are from one of those institutions, you should have your username and password, which you will pop into the website when you go to anatomy.tv to log in. Okay. Now, Primal also allows you to customize and personalize your experience a little bit. And I don't want to confuse you with more login details now, but if you haven't set up a personal profile, then you won't have any login details yet. And the same goes for a Palms profile. We're not really going to speak about Palms today, but if you would like to, you can create a personal profile and a Palms profile. You need to set these up independently and they will then merge. But the personal profile allows you to customize your experience, and the Palms profile allows you to track your history as you move through the learning modules. But we're not going to speak any further about Palms today, okay? And then there are mobile apps available for download. If you would like the instructions on how to download and access one of the apps, in the chat box, please go, Steph, send me the PDF, please, and pop your email address. The apps are really helpful to have for offline use. And quite excitingly, augmented reality. So I'll discuss more about these apps when we get to 3D real time. But if you would like the PDF on how to download these apps, please pop it in the chat box and I'll send those over to you. Okay. Then, if you are needing more help and support, we are here to assist you. So just like this session happening today, we run monthly webinars, which are advertised on our Instagram. On YouTube, we have some really great training videos. We have a short crash course title playlist that will give you individual training videos on individual titles. We also have some of our older webinars. And on TikTok, to be honest, we're just having some fun over there and trying to relate with the community because we get the struggles of being a health science student. So our handle on all of those platforms is anatomy_sucks. We're having a joke here. Anatomy does not suck, but we use these platforms to help show you how anatomy doesn't suck and how Primal can help you. Okay, but without further ado, let's jump into the meat of today's session and let's get started. Okay, so here I am on the homepage of Primal Pictures. Just a reminder, when you're on campus, you can go directly to the website, which is anatomy.tv, and it's going to log you straight in. When I'm off campus, I need to go through the library database. So let's do a quick example of that. If you've never used the library database, you'll pop your institution name into Google, and then you'll say library websites. I'm just going to use Stellenbosch as an example. And I'm going to Google the Stellenbosch University Library. So here on the library website, I see, there's my e-databases. And you either want to look at the e-databases or the e-resources. Now, I know on this website, I have an alphabetical index, and Primal Pictures is listed under A as anatomy.tv. So there it is over there, and I will click this link to access it off campus. Some databases will list it as Primal Pictures as well, or just as Primal Pictures. So if I remember correctly, if I come down here, we will also see Primal Pictures, and it says anatomy.tv. So those are the same things, and this is how you access off campus. But here I am now happily on the homepage. Okay, so let me take you through just navigating this homepage a little bit before we dive into our 3 examples for today. So the titles platform is where you have all of the different titles available to you at your institution. But if you use the little man logo in the top right-hand corner to set up a personal profile, then you can use the recommended, favorite, and recently viewed tabs. So I'm going to sign in because I already have a personal profile. And once I'm signed into that, I will be able to see my recommended, favorited, and recently viewed titles. So recommendations are made to you based on what you say you are studying. Here I'm getting the recommendations for dentistry. And then you can also favorite individual titles and see what you looked at last. I find it best, or the way I prefer to use Primal, is going directly to the title that I know is going to help me. But I can only do that because I know a lot about the platform. So you have other tabs to help you search or filter through content if you don't know where to go. We're going to skip past the Learn tab. That's not relevant for us today. But the next one is the Browse option. And here you can filter everything you have available to you by the 4 different options you see on your screen. There is also an alphabetical index, just like you would find in a traditional textbook. But when in doubt, search it out. So I have a search bar and a results pane. So let's say today I'm looking for pectoralis major. Let's say that's the muscle I'm interested in learning about today. And then I will get all of the different 3D views, the images, the videos, animations, all of that great stuff that relates to the pectoralis major and its related anatomy. We'll get all of those. Oh, I see I called it pectoralis, not pectoralis, excuse me. But you'll see that it figured out what I was looking for. So now let's look for the pectoralis minor muscle. And you can see that we can open up multiple search panes at once, and we can toggle between our results panes and work through our learning experience. Okay, so those are the ways in which you can try filter or search for individual pieces of information. But let's now jump into the meat of today's session and the first title. And the first one we're going to look at is anatomy and physiology. After that, we will discuss 3D real-time, and then we will finish off with functional anatomy. Okay, so that is our pathway that we will follow. And like I mentioned, we'll start with the anatomy and physiology title. And this is what I like to call your online textbook. But it's a lot more engaging and exciting and easier to understand than a traditional textbook because of all of the really great visualizations we have throughout your guided learning material. So we have 20 learning modules here, 11 of which are the 11 systems of the human body. You'll see we start with introductory and basic science topics before we move on to the systemic approach. And for today's example, I could either use the skeletal system or the muscular system, because that's what we're focusing on today. But I'm going to choose the muscular system, and you'll see that for most of today's training session, I will focus on those because that is quite a lot trickier than the osteology or the skeletal system. That's one of the easier systems to learn. So just to orientate ourselves in our learning space over here, on the left-hand side, we have our menu. In the middle, we have our main viewing pane or our interaction pane. And on the right-hand side, we have our information pane. Now, the first icon in the menu is where this system has been broken down into different topics or different lessons. And this is going to cover the gross anatomy, so what's visible to the naked eye, the microanatomy or the histology, so that is a cellular level, that is what is not visible to the naked eye, as well as the physiology. Okay, and I think I'm going to use the microanatomy lesson as our example today, because the gross anatomy, we will go into more detail when we get to some of the other titles we're going to take a look at. But I want you to bear in mind that we have gross anatomy, physiology, and microanatomy here for each system. But for today's example, we're going to use the microanatomy. Okay, so now I can minimize these topics by clicking on the book icon again, and now I can focus my learning on this lesson covering the microanatomy. At the top of the information pane, you'll see it says learning objectives, and I can maximize those to cover what content or to check what content will be covered within this guided learning experience and make sure I'm happy before I move my way through. But then we start off with an introduction to the anatomy of skeletal muscle fibers. So it gives us sort of some background information, and it explains that it's made up of constituent parts, which are then grouped in different levels to form the entire muscle as follows. So it takes us through the fascicles, the fibers, the myofibrils, and the myofilaments. And we have a 3D model here to help us understand that. So for each of your 3D models, you will see that there are rollover labels for every visible structure. And when you click on a structure, you get the name of it at the top of your screen. And now we can engage with a 3D model on different levels of interactivity. But for this one, we can use the left and right arrows at the bottom to move through the different organization levels of a skeletal muscle fiber. So if I click towards, no, forgive me, I want to go right first. By going right, I'm going all the way to the beginning where we can see the skeletal elements, and we see that the muscle we're taking a look at today is flexor pollicis longus. Okay, so that's a muscle within the forearm. So now we kind of have our orientation. But as I click the left arrow, you see it gets closer and closer. Now it's coming even closer, so I can see the individual folliculi, and I can see a muscle fiber over there. And if I then go closer, it's bringing out one individual muscle fiber to help me understand. And then you'll see that it shows us individual fibers or cells, as well as the important vasculature that is found around each fiber or cell. And I'm just going to deselect those structures, and I'm going to keep moving. So here we zoom in even further, so we can see the sarcolemma, we can see the nucleus, we can see these individual fibers over here. And if we go even closer, we can take a look at each myofibril, and we saw some of the important sarcoplasm components. Okay, so that, for example, I think is really, really helpful in understanding this complex organization of skeletal muscle fibers. Okay, now after we learn about that, it goes through some individual components like endo, peri, and epimysium. So that's the connective tissue. And then we have an interactive learning exercise. So these are here to help you test your knowledge and consolidate what you've just learned and make sure you're good to go and move on to the next learning objective. So this is a very quick quiz, but I'm going to close this off for the sake of time. And now for argument's sake, I could continue to work my way through the lesson. Here it's now going through the sarcolemma, the transverse tubules, other important small aspects. Then we go on to focusing on the organization of a sarcomere, and it's going to take you through all of the important bands and lines. And then we finish off with a very important histological image. So this is what we can can expect skeletal muscle fibers to look like if we are looking at them through a microscope. Okay, that was a very quick example of what these lessons look like and how you can use them, but it's easy peasy. These lessons are here to guide you through the experience, so don't overthink it. And remember, at any stage, you can change what lesson you're working on. So if I wanted to, I could now come down to the muscles of the trunk, and I could focus on this gross anatomy, and I can use these brilliant 3D models to help me understand the anatomy it's teaching me. Okay, so one thing to note here is with these 3D models, we can rotate them this time using the left and right arrows, and the up and down arrows are what add or remove anatomy. So always take a look at what engagement tools you have available to you when you're looking at a piece of visual information. Okay, now let's quickly go to the rest of the menu and see what else we have available to us there. Okay, so next is just an alphabetical index like you would find in a traditional textbook. But please note that at the top of your information pane, you still have a search bar, so you can search for any structure or piece of information at any time. Okay, after that, this little flask icon has all of the interactive learning exercises found throughout the lessons. So if you want to go directly to those activities, you can do so by finding them here. And then the light bulb icon has just the quizzes that were found throughout the lessons. Okay, so this is a really great way to come through and quickly test if you've retained your information before one of your exams or upcoming tests. Okay, and then we get to some new information when we get to the clinical correlates. So 3 important things here. Number 1, we've learned about some normal anatomy and physiology. But what happens when things go wrong? So under the clinical section, you have a range of common clinical conditions that will affect the system. So something incredibly relevant when it comes to understanding the muscular system is compartment syndrome. All of our muscles are found in these beautiful fascial compartments, but that means that if there is a pathology manifesting in one of those compartments, we can get some issues that arise, and that's known as compartment syndrome. So here we have an overview, the causes, symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment of compartment syndrome. Okay, and then after that, unfortunately, as you and I age, our anatomy ages with us, and our physiology gets a little bit less efficient at doing what it's designed to do. It's really important that we understand how aging affects the body, because someone who's young and fit and healthy versus someone who's old and not fit and not healthy, those 2 patients deserve to receive equal quality of care. So it's important that we understand how the aging process affects the body, so elderly patients can get great quality care too. So here we can find out the aging information relating to the muscular system. And lastly, we have some case studies. So let's take the example of cerebral palsy. Here we have Rosalind, who is a 5-year-old female who unfortunately was born with cerebral palsy. And cerebral palsy does commonly affect the muscular system. So it's important for us to now understand what parts of the system will be affected by this disease. So there are a range of questions that are asked to us regarding Rosalind and her case, and they start with easier questions that are basic, that then progressively get a little bit more complicated. So here you can try and answer these questions yourself before you reveal the answer with the eye icon. Okay, now I'm really going to change the content that I'm looking at before I take you through the rest of the menu, and you'll see why in a short moment. Let's go down to a nice 3D model. Let's use this one over here. And now I'm going to take you through the rest of the icons. So the star icon is where you can favorite a piece of information to easily revisit it at any time. Now you'll see it says that my favorites here are stored in my cloud. And that is because I'm logged into my personal profile. Please note that if you don't set up a personal profile, when you store anything or you favorite anything, that will be stored to, it will say your browser, or in other words, the device that you are using at the time when you favorite that piece of information. So that is one of the major benefits of setting up a personal profile. If you are signed in and you favorite or save any content, you can access it on any device. So I can now log in on my phone and see those same favorites. Okay, then you can share a link to anything you are looking at. If you want to save it to revisit at a later stage or share it with a friend or anything like that, you can come and copy the link to any individual piece of content you are looking at, and you can then share or save that. Please don't worry about the embed function. This is here so that lecturers can put content in your LMS, so you don't need to worry about that. But very importantly is the save function. So at the moment, I'm using online content, but I may need to save some of this content to pop it in my study notes or to be able to use the content offline when I don't have access to the internet. So let's say I really like this image over here and I want to save a photo of that. You can click Save Image. That will then download, and now I can pop that image into my study notes. Okay, that's saved on a transparent background. I have my computer on dark mode at the moment, but you can also save the entire lesson in the right-hand information pane as a PDF document. So don't worry about topic text. I don't recommend that one. It's a little bit boring, but you can save any of these lessons as a PDF document. So here I'm looking at my lessons of the muscles of the neck, and here I have all of that lesson information available to me. Okay, then the last icon in our menu are just some settings that you can change according to personal preferences. But that brings us to the end of the anatomy and physiology of the skeletal system. Just to very quickly recap, on the home page, we came to anatomy and physiology. We then chose which learning module or which system we wanted to work on, and we chose the muscular system. And then for this system, we have a range of different topics or different lessons laid out for us in our online textbook, which we can work our way through in a guided manner using the information pane. Okay, I hope that was easy enough to follow along too. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. I will help you at the end. But next, we are going to move on to 3D real time. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite titles because it's where we get to perform a virtual dissection and we have a lot of freedom with the anatomy. This is also one of the titles that has apps available for download, which mean you can use the content fully offline. Just remember, if you want me to send you the PDF on how to download the apps, please pop it in the chat box because there is quite a specific way to do it to make sure you're logged into your university subscription. But these apps are really, really great because it allows you to use them offline and, quite exciting, use the augmented reality function. Okay, so I'm going to use the spine as today's example, and we're going to focus on some of the muscles around the spine. You'll see that the body is broken down into different regions. You do also have the whole body if you want to take a holistic view, but we're going to focus on some of the important small muscles of the spine because I found these quite tricky to understand. If I'm being very honest, when I was a student, there are a lot of teeny tiny muscles sitting around the spinal column, and I found those quite complicated. So I wish I got to learn them in a platform like this when I was in your shoes. Okay, so starting again with just orientating ourselves. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. In the middle, we have our main viewing pane or our virtual dissection table. And then on the right-hand side, we have our list of structures. What I'm going to start with is showing you how you can create your own customized 3D model if there is very specific anatomy you want to look at. You can fully choose what is on your dissection table. But please don't feel overwhelmed because after that, I will take you through all of the pre-made models. So there are a range of really great pre-made models over here, which chances are will meet your needs, but sometimes you'll need to really customize your experience, and you can do so with the list of structures on the right. So to start off, I'm actually going to click clear on my dissection tool dashboard at the bottom of my screen so that my dissection table is completely clear. And now I can use these groups of structures on the right-hand side to make my 3D model. So if I click the arrow next to bones and I then maximize these lists, you'll see that I can add in individual pieces of anatomy, one at a time. Okay, so there I've added in the sternum, the clavicles, and the scapulae. But if I click on the entire group of structures, so if I click on bones as a whole, it's going to add in all of the bones that are within this group, or all of the structures within this group. So as our next example, let's now come down to muscles. And yet again, I could come here and I could add in individual muscles one at a time. Or I can click groups of muscles and add in all of these muscles. Or if I wanted to, I could simply click on muscles as a whole. And now all of the muscles in this group have been added. Okay, a very quick example of how to create your own 3D model. Now, how do we engage with this model and how do we learn more? So firstly, you've seen me rotating my model a little bit. To do that, you click down on the left arrow of your mouse and you swipe along your screen. That is going to rotate your model. Okay, if the model looks a little bit jittery while you watch me, it's just because I'm sharing my screen over the internet, but please note that this is nice and smooth and seamless for the end user. So I do recommend going and trying it for yourselves. Okay, now if I want to zoom in and out, let's work our way into the thoracic cage. Let's zoom in using the scroll function on our mouse. Now I want to start moving a little bit more up. So I'm going to change my model's position on my screen. I'm going to click my left and right cursor at the same time. And you'll see that that allows you to move the 3D model's position on your screen. So I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. Then I'm going to zoom in further. And I'm going to sit within the thoracic cavity over here. And I'm going to take a look at some of these important small muscles over here that are connecting our cervical vertebrae to our lumbar vertebrae. We can take a look at some of these very important tiny muscles in here, and we get a very unique view by doing this. Okay, but now let's scroll out. Let's change our model a little bit. Let's look at the back muscles. And now let's take a look at what we can do with this 3D model using the different inspection and dissection tools at the bottom of our screen. Okay, so I'm going to click on the left trapezius muscle and I'm going to click context. That simply is going to show us that structure with its relevant anatomical context. Not much changed here because we were looking at a lot of the structures that are relevant to the trapezius already. Next is inspect. So you'll see now I've isolated just the trapezius muscle. So now I can appreciate its anterior form, and then I can come back here and I can appreciate its posterior form, and I can better visualize how this strip over here is attaching to the spine of my scapula. Okay, let's deselect inspect and go back to where we were. If you select a structure and examine it, you'll see that everything else is turned into X-ray mode, and just our selected structure has remained opaque. So this is kind of helping me understand the relational anatomy in more detail. Okay, and then we'll deselect examine. And we're going to zoom in a little bit more, because the next thing that we're going to do is click ghost. So that has now turned my trapezius muscle into X-ray mode. And now I can visualize some of the important muscles that sit deep to the trapezius without completely removing it. So I can see my splenius capitis, I can see my rhomboid minor and major, and I can start to visualize some of the important 3 components of erect or spinae. And now if I wanted to start looking at the deeper structures more, I can select it and I can hide it. So by selecting a structure and clicking hide, that's where we start to perform a virtual dissection. And now we're starting to look at some of the deeper anatomy and some of the deeper muscles. Okay, so that's how you can use these 3D models. Now, I'm sure you notice there are still rollover labels for all of the visible structures, and you will get the name of the structure at the top of your screen, as well as a little speaker icon, which will give you the pronunciation of that structure. But very importantly, you have your text box. And this is going to help you learn the theoretical information while you visually understand the anatomy. So I'm just going to change the settings so you can read it a little bit better. There we go. So I've chosen my serratus posterior superior. And what's important for me is origin, insertion, innervation, blood supply, and action. So for each muscle, when we select it, you will get all of that important info that you need to remember for your test. Okay, now let's go through the rest of the menu. So we created our own 3D model over here, but in the window frame icon, at the top, you have some dissection images and you have some pre-made models. So I would like to warn you now before I make one of these larger, I am going to open up one of the dissection image. So if you're not comfortable visualizing that, I recommend you look away now and I will tell you once we are finished looking at a dissection. But I'm going to choose the dissection of the thoracolumbar region in the muscles. So I'm going to click on that dissection and then you will see I've got a small little dissection image over here and my 3D model changed. So I'm going to make the dissection half page by clicking on this little icon over here. And now my dissection image and my 3D model or my digital twin are on a similar scale. So our dissection image is still fully interactive. You see that there are rollover labels for every visible structure. And now if I select a structure on either my dissection image or on my 3D model, it highlights those structures on both. My color right now being orange is a little bit tricky to see. Let's make it blue. And now let's change what we're highlighting. And you see that it highlights these structures on both sides to really help us understand the body donor anatomy. Okay, I have closed up that dissection image. If you weren't so comfortable looking at it, you can look back now. But please note that after your dissection images, you have a range of pre-made 3D models where you can choose between 5 different tissue depths. So here, for example, is basically the 3D model that we sat and created on our own. So always come and take a look at these before you create your own 3D model to see if you can save some time. Okay, I can still favorite anything to revisit later. Here are some settings that I can change according to my personal preferences. An important one I'd like to highlight is body donor colors. So that turns everything kind of into the hues of brown that we're used to seeing with a body donor. I'm going to add in all of my arteries and veins to quickly show you that the setting is really helpful for forcing you to think more critically about the difference between an artery and vein, not based on their color, but rather based on their anatomy, which is how it's going to be in the clinical or dissection settings. Okay, then you can use the labeling and drawing and pinning tools to create a customized label diagram. Let me remove some of these structures, and then you'll see I can click plus label, and I can add labels into any important structures. I can use the drawing tools to point to anything specific, and you can even add a freestanding text box to add in I can't spell today, whatever you want. Okay, so you could write some of, I still can't spell today. It's not easy, guys. So there, I can now type in maybe some of my important theoretical information that I want to remember that relates to this image. And now I can save an image of that using my camera icon. And then a drop-down box will come down from the top and ask me, do you want to download this image? It didn't happen because it didn't like that I didn't give it a name. Let's give it a very random name. I'm not going to add to favorites as well. I'm going to click OK. Now it should ask me, do you want to download? So I'm going to click confirm. And then that image has now downloaded and is available on my computer. Okay, once again, here it's on a transparent background. My computer is just in dark mode. All right, then you can share a link to anything you're viewing or have created. And lastly, these arrows at the bottom are here to help you manipulate the model if you forgot how to do so using your mouse. Okay. Now, 3D real-time is where you can download apps and use this great content fully offline, and you can use augmented reality. It's a really great setting. It's a lot of fun, and it really helps understand the relationship between anatomy a lot better. So if you would like more info again on those apps, please, in the chat box, say PDF, please, with your email address, and I'll email that to you. But if you are using the apps and you want to use the augmented reality function, please come to settings and switch on AR mode, which will be at the bottom of your settings. This setting isn't available on the desktop version, only a mobile device with a camera. But if you're ready to play around with AR, come down to settings and toggle on your AR mode on the mobile version. Okay, that brings us to the end of 3D real time. As a reminder, this is your virtual dissection space where you have a whole amount, or a huge amount, excuse me, of flexibility and freedom with what you do with the anatomy and how you learn more about it. Okay, I'm going to close that up now. And the last thing we're going to look at is functional anatomy. And this is where the magic really starts to happen for our musculoskeletal system. So we've learned about a lot of the normal and the static anatomy and physiology, but we haven't seen the body in action yet. We haven't seen how do these muscles and bones work together to create all of the movements that our body is capable of producing. And that we're going to start focusing on here in functional anatomy. Okay, but let's start with orientating ourselves very quickly before we do that. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. In the middle, we have our main viewing pane or interaction pane. And on the right-hand side is our information pane. This time, you need to direct the learning, just like we did in 3D real time. In anatomy and physiology, it directed us through the learning with the information pane. We now choose what is shown in our information pane depending on the structures that we select. Okay, you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. But the first icon in our menu is where we start with a range of 3D views or 3D models, focusing on the musculoskeletal systems. Okay, so this is where we can recap some of that important anatomy. And as I maximize these lists and I choose one of the 3D models, let's choose the forearm and hand as our example. You will notice that these 3D models over here function very similarly to the ones in anatomy and physiology. So we can rotate them using the left and right arrows, or you can move between different layers of anatomy using the up and down arrows. So as I move down or deeper, I'm getting rid of some of the more superficial musculature. Okay, a different feature are these three little colored circles at the bottom. With the red one, we can add in the arteries. Let's zoom in a little bit more so we can see these. So we've added in the arteries. We can also add in the lymphatic vessels using the yellow one. Excuse me, not the lymphatic vessels. Those were the nerves that we've added in there. And then lastly, the purple and green one adds in veins and lymphatics. Okay, and you may have noticed that when I clicked on the median nerve there, it gave me the important information about the median nerve. Okay, so just like in 3D real time, when you select a structure, you will get the important explanatory information about each of these structures. Okay, so these 3D models are here to help you recap the important anatomy relating to the musculoskeletal systems. Next, we have some dissection slides. Another warning before I do so, I am going to open up some dissection slides, so please look away now if you don't want to look at the sensitive information. I'll warn you once we've finished. But a slide is a two-dimensional image. So here we have all of the dissection slides organized per region. If we stuck with the forearm, we could come and take a look at a left forearm dissection over here of the superficial muscles, and we can identify some of those important components. Okay. Then, after the dissection images, we have some trigger points. So these are focused on the head and neck and the upper limb. I can now confirm that we are no longer looking at a dissection image if you weren't comfy with looking at that. But here, for example, I've chosen the trigger points of the scalene muscle, and we can take a look at the 4 different areas or trigger points that are used to focus on this muscle. Okay. Now, the magic hasn't happened yet. The magic is going to happen very soon in the movies and animation section. And I'm going to skip past the movies and I'm going to come to the animations first, and you'll see why in a moment. But here we have the body broken up into the different regions, and here is where we can see the bones and the muscles in action. So let's choose the upper extremity and let's go to the elbow, seeing as we were looking at the arm and the forearm, and let's take a look at flexion or extension of the elbow. This will buffer the first time it plays, but if we play through this animation, we can now see all of the different muscles involved in flexion or extension of the elbow, including our flexor carpi radialis and our pronator teres. If you select any structure on the animation, you're still going to get the important information. We have our biceps brachii with the 2 different heads and the brachialis that are also working hard in this movement, as well as the triceps brachii. Okay, and you can pause and play this movement at any time, and it is showing you at which points the different muscles are activated during the movement. Okay, and we can do this for any region. Let's go to the gross motor movements. So we have the different regions, and then we have some gross motor movements, which involve multiple muscle groups at once. Here's an example of jogging. And now we can see all the muscles involved in jogging, and I can use the left and right arrows to change my perspective of this animation a little bit while I watch which muscles are involved, and at any time I can select a muscle and learn more about it. Okay, so these animations are really the magical place to be, but the videos give you some surface anatomy movies. They're very helpful, but also these animations in video form, which is the easiest way to save them for offline use. Okay, you can't save one of the animations, but if I now whiz down and I come down to my download function, I can save this movie, which is showing me contralateral rotation of the head and cervical spine. Okay, so the movies are where you will go if you want to download something for offline use or to put it into your own study notes. Okay, let's quickly whiz through the rest of the icons in the menu. We're very nearly finished. So the anatomical structures, these are actually also 3D models. Similarly to the 3D views we had in the beginning, but this time they are organized by system and they take a very focused approach. So you'll see that it lists individual muscles. Let's take a look at this first example of the external obliques, and it will have the mentioned structure in the name already highlighted for you, and that 3D model is going to focus on whatever structure it is named after. Okay, so this is just a more focused approach to the 3D models. After that, I'm going to whiz through. We have our alphabetical index, like our textbooks have, but when in doubt, at the top of your information pane, search it out. Okay, we can favorite any content to easily revisit later. You can share content, you can download content, and you can change settings according to your personal preferences. But that brings us to the end of functional anatomy. Okay, so very quickly to recap, the magic about functional anatomy is it gives you some great 3D models to help you recap the normal anatomy of the bones and muscles. And the magic really happens in the animation section where we can see the bones and the muscles involved in most of the normal movements that our human body can create. Okay, so today I took you through the anatomy and physiology title, a great place to start with your learning. Then we dove into the anatomy in more detail in 3D real time, and we learned how to use a virtual dissection. We can download apps and use augmented reality to put 3D models in our environment using the camera on our phones or tablets. And then we finished off with functional anatomy, where we could see the bones and the muscles in action.